partnership going. And if we do and are successful in that, in the Senate, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the House that otherwise would not be amenable. But we've got to do this fast, because at the end of September, the insurance companies have got to know what their rates are for the new year starting January the 1st. Yes, ma'am.
I understand that there's legislation being proposed that would appropriate the funds for cost sharing reduction and mandate that they be used so that the president can't sabotage the ACA by cutting those off. Is there also talk underway of appropriating funds for and mandating the call centers to help people sign up and find a plan, and the original length of time that people would have to sign up for, which are two of the other methods of sabotage that are underway?
If you could get that passed through law in this very difficult environment, otherwise, that's one of the vulnerabilities that the president and the administration can do sabotages by making it hard or harder to sign up. And that's one of the vulnerabilities. If we could pass it, that'd be another thing.
There'd be an option to offer that as an amendment in the budget when they're working on tax cuts coming up.
It would be an option, but what you're asking me, what is practical?
Right.
And that...
Which is a different question.
The main thing we ought to do is get the fund stabilized so the rates are not going to go up. Or, for example, if we created a reinsurance fund, I had it already costed out, it'd lower the rates 13% in Florida. So if we can do a few things like that, then you're really cooking.
So that's what you would say that we should focus our advocacy on at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Reinsurance fund and cost sharing reductions?
Between now and the end of September, let's get it through the Congress to stabilize the existing law. And that would mean the cost sharing reductions and other things like the reinsurance fund. And we'll see how these negotiations, but to his credit, the Republican chairman of the Health Committee, Lamar Alexander, who is considered a moderate, has indicated in the face of a lot of scorn coming from the base of the Republican Party, that he is going to do this. And I hope that works. And I was very hopeful in this meeting last week before we left town. So you all amazingly surprised me, and I'm so I'm not usually at a loss for words. Thank you.
Well, we brought our main two words.
Thank you. In light of all the news about Credit Suisse and HBSC, is there a way to get the budget to focus on the amount of money that is laundered out of the United States to avoid paying taxes?
Yeah.
And that would help pay for health care.
In an ideal world, yes. In this highly charged, partisan, and ideologically driven political environment, if we can just get the ACA stabilized, I'm going to be thankful for that. And then try to take, if it works, that bipartisanship and go and do the next thing, bipartisan tax reform. And then investment in infrastructure, yes, which we so desperately need. I've been out in all these little rural counties all over the Panhandle, and they're just desperate. You should see in the meeting in Bonifay in Holmes County that was earlier today, they've got dilapidated, some of the little cities, dilapidated streets. There's a little town called Esto. They have a sewer plant that is just not really functioning like it should. And of course, they want me to help them get this, which I am only too happy to do if I know about it. But then again, there's only so much money available. I can go and help them with their grant application and all of that. And it just underscored the need for infrastructure. The librarian was telling me what a difference it makes that at least on the E-rate program that we got internet to the libraries out in the rural little communities. Now we need for the children that live in these rural communities, we need to get broadband out there so they can learn just like the kids in the city can. And these were the pleas coming to me all over the Panhandle. It was just amazing. The other thing that's so amazing is, oh, how different Florida is in one spot from another. And that is because we are a microcosm of the country. And so really we are reflective of the country because a lot of the country has moved to us. So in South Florida, you've got one vibrant Hispanic culture, and a little further north, up around Broward and Palm Beach County, you can hear a lot of New York accents. Go across to the West Coast and you'll hear a lot of Midwestern accents. Come further into North Florida, it's LA, Lower Alabama.
Another way you might say Florida is a microcosm of the country is that with all these communities, you know, the voter ID laws and the voter suppression effects of that, you know, is reflective of what would happen if that were in place all across the country. Do you have a program in place for fighting that and restoring the full Voting Rights Act?
Well, let me tell you what we did when the Supreme Court knocked down a part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Then we were concerned that we were going to see a lot of the voter intimidation that we'd seen earlier in the decade in Florida. And so I got the Attorney General at that time, and I distributed to our friends in the press the letter that the Attorney General had written to the governor approaching the 2014 election, saying because of the past questionable tactics in conducting elections, namely the results where you had lines that were waiting for 7 hours in Miami and so forth, that he said the Justice Department is going to be looking over the shoulder of Florida in their conduct of the elections.
Is there a
Now,
move to return to paper ballots?
I don't know about that. That's all conducted by the state of Florida, so you'll have to ask there. You pointed out a potential vulnerability. Now, I'm not so, by the way, now take it a step further. I not only have to worry about my political opponents, I have to worry about the Russians. And so I'm not so concerned about the Russians invading and changing an actual vote count. What they could do, and do easily, is go into the registrations, which they have already entered, and we have proof that they have entered in a number of states. And then if they just start deleting, particularly if they go to a targeted precinct that votes a particular preference, and start deleting, say, 1 of every 10 voters, and the voter arrives at the polling station on election day, and they say, "I'm sorry, Mr. Jones, you're not registered." And you see what kind of confusion that would cause on election day. They have the clear capability of doing that. And so when you get concerned about the former CIA, former FBI director's inquiry into what the Russians, you hope it's going to be a thorough inquiry. And that as a result of his inquiry, that the government will take action against such a disruption. This is not new for the Russians. They did this in the Baltic states. They have done it in other Western European states. They clearly tried it in the French election for president, and it boomeranged on them because it got out what they had done. And they're trying it right now in the German election. And all of this is very similar to what they have done in ours. And that is to sow chaos and therefore undermine an election in a democracy, in a constitutional democracy, which makes it very, it's another new political opponent that we have to battle. Yes, sir.
What about going offline for the registration? You know, the registration's where the risk is.
Yeah.
Can't they just go offline?
You're talking about a mail-in ballot? Well, that would help if you could get everybody to vote by mail-in. But there's going to be a certain percent, usually around 40%. If you're lucky with early vote being 60%, there's still going to be a sizable number that are going to vote on election day.
But you still got the risk of the Russians getting into the registration system. That's what I was wondering,
That's
whether
correct.
that could be taken offline, zero risk at that point.
All right, now, see, that's where the federal government doesn't conduct the elections. That's done by each state.
You know,
Are
Yes,
the
ma'am.
channels still in line to get the experience from the French and the German elections?
Say that again, please.
Are the channels between the French and us and the Germans and us still in good enough shape that we'll get their experience to profit from?
Well, we've already profited from the experience of what the Russians tried to do in France.